I've heard quite a lot of feedback that sounds good. Thank you, all of you. I started recording the session as well. Recording will be available. So let's get started. If you have any questions during the session, you can write your questions in question section or raise your hand. I would preferably leave questions to the end of webinar in a Q&A section. But it's better that you have your question there so I can go and answer them. If there is any question that I hadn't time to answer the question, I will then reply the questions in my weblog, so you can check that weblog as well. Okay, let's start. This session is about incremental load with SSIS. Thank you all for attending. I'm Reza Rad, SQL Server MVP, Data Warehouse and BI architect and consultant, author of some SQL Server BI books and SSIS webcast series, which actually has been produced in Channel 9, actually has been released in Channel 9, YouTube, and Radacat website as well. And Microsoft Certified Trainer and Professional, and these are my contact information. My contact information will be available later on as well. Agenda of this meeting, I'll talk about why we are doing incremental load and what actually is incremental load. Then I'll talk about different methods of incremental load. First is change data capture, how to use change data capture for incremental load, and how to use date time columns for incremental load if change data capture doesn't work, and how to use unique identifier. Then I'll talk about a little about how you can implement a rollback scenario with adding just a few metadata columns in your solution. We might not have a time to go through all of these, but I'll do my best to cover all of them. So first of all, why we are doing incremental load? Incremental load is actually, there are quite a lot of different reasons for doing incremental load. One of the most important one is that we are doing incremental load because we might want to do massive we actually have massive data, and massive data reload takes quite a lot of time. Sometimes you want to do frequent updates for users in your BI system, and there are quite a lot of limitations on source system that actually will affect that as well. So let's go through them one by one. So when I say massive data load, you are probably familiar with that if you worked with an enterprise data warehouse environment. If you want to reload terabytes of data every night, if you want to actually have an ETL process takes 10 hours or sometimes even more, if you want to spend precious money of customer or your own business on just CPU and RAM and performance issues all the time, if your answer is yes to any of these questions, then incremental load is not for you. So incremental load is to reduce the actually performance issues, reduce the quite a lot of money spent on full load, to reduce the ETL time and all these kind of things. Sometimes you have customers that, when I say customers, I mean your BI system customers. You might work in your in-house development actually working team. You might have BI or reporting users who want actually the data to be updated more frequently than daily. They want data to be available every hour, the new data to be available every 30 minutes, sometimes every 10 minutes. So you have to actually, you can't do a full data load of, I don't know, a terabyte of data every hour, every 30 minutes. You need to have an incremental load approach for that. Sometimes there are limitations on the source system. For example, you actually have a source system that is highly under pressure by users, like a CRM system or anything like that. It should be available with no actually interference from other systems, from an ETL that is doing something, from 7 a.m. till, I don't know, 2 a.m. of the morning of the second day, of the next day. Sometimes source systems do recycle some data, and you do need the historical data to be available for you. If you do reload, you will sometimes lose the historical information. There are quite a lot of other reasons for doing incremental load. I just mentioned 3 of them, and why you might not want to do incremental load. I've heard that quite a lot, that incremental load is not a solution for me, and the main reason usually is that they're saying that implementing full load is easy. Yeah, that's definitely easy, because you just put the source connection, a destination connection, and just get everything from that. That's easy. But in this session, I'll show you how easy is incremental load implementation as well. Sometimes you say, I don't have a time and budget for doing that, but you should consider that if you do a full load, then you have to spend quite a lot of time, much more than the time that you do for implementing incremental load, for doing support hours for your full load. Support hours by, for example, checking performance issues, doing some quite a lot of supporting for those actually type of issues that might happen afterwards. And sometimes you might say that my data set is too small. That might be a good reason for not doing incremental load. If you have a very small data set, 1,000 records, let's say, you might just do a full load. But you should consider growth of that data set in 10 years, 20 years. Is this ETL will stay in a good shape after 10 years, after 15 years? If your answer is yes, then you can do full load instead of incremental. And now let's talk about what is actually incremental load. By incremental load, we mean we don't want to get full set of data from source system into our data warehouse. What we want to get is only changes. So we want to capture only changes, and change might be inserts, updates, and deletes. And sometimes this actually called as delta load as well. So if you hear delta load or incremental load, they are doing the same. So consider this type of scenario. We have a source system. There will be quite a lot of inserts, updates, and deletes from that source system by users, by web application, by quite a lot of systems that work with that source system database. And there will be a change set after doing these inserts, updates, deletes. So our job in incremental load is to fetch out that change set and only load that change set into our data warehouse. That actually is what incremental load is doing. So it's quite, easy in terms of looking at this diagram, and it is kind of easy in the implementation as well. So there are different methods for incremental load. Different methods is based on how you identify the change set. I just named 3 of them here. There are some other methods as well. These are 3 main methods, most common methods that you might use. One of them is change data capture, which I will talk about right after this section. And using date time columns, using date time columns is another method, and using unique identifier, which is the last method if you can't work with other methods. Let's start with change data capture. So by change data capture, you might be familiar with that. Change data capture is available in some of RDVMs, some of database vendors. Oracle supports that, SQL Server supports that, some other databases also support that. And this change data capture actually capture all inserts, updates, and deletes and load them into a change set. This actually in SQL Server world, this works with log files, with LSN, which is like sequence number, and this identifies based on those log file information what are the new changes. And in SQL Server world, this is available in SQL Server 2008 or higher, and this is an enterprise feature. So if you have SQL Server 2012, but standard version you can't have change data capture. You need to have enterprise version of that. And for having CDC or change data capture, you have to enable that in your database first. There's a stored procedure that you can enable that in your database. And it is quite important that for CDC to work, you need SQL Server agent up and running. This is one of the most common issues that I've seen in forums, that people ask why my CDC is not working. And when we investigate more, we understand that the SQL Server agent is not running because this works with some SQL Server jobs. I'll show you how it works. So you have to enable CDC on the database, on the source database. And then there are some scripts that you can check if CDC is enabled or not. I'll show you. And then you can enable CDC for the table as well and check if CDC is enabled for the table. I'll show you all of these through a demo. Then after enabling CDC on the table and database, source table, source database, then you can use some CDC control flow tasks, one CDC control flow task, which is available in SSIS 2012 and higher. So if you want to use CDC in SSIS, you need to have 2012 version or higher. In 2014, it's also available. Unfortunately, in 2016, because it's still a beta release, it's not yet available, but it will be available in the final release of that. So there's a CDC control task that you can manage the change set from there. And then there are a couple of components in data flow called CDC Source and CDC Splitter. CDC Source will get all change set from the source table, and CDC Splitter will split that into insert, delete, and update output. So based on different outputs, you can work differently on that. So let me show you through demo how this is going to work. So I want to first, before starting the project, I just explained the solution for you. I have a source database here. Source database, I'll call that source database CDC, which has a table sales transaction underscore for incremental load. So this is my sales transaction table. I want to get data from this table. As you see, it's some sales transaction table. I want to get data from this table and load that into a staging area first. My staging area would be Inc staging, and I have a stage sales underscore C table here. And for this stage table, I have added everything actually is exactly the same as columns that we have there with a status column. A status column shows that is this record updated, inserted, or deleted. I'll set those status, and then at the time of loading that into my data warehouse, which is inc underscore DW, I'll check those status and load them into my fact internet sales underscore C. So that's the whole solution I want to implement. So let's start with working on the CDC. So for starting working on CDC, let me bring my script here. I'll first disable everything that I've done for CDC to start from scratch, and you have an understanding what's happening there. So I'll disable CDC on the database and on the table. Okay, so now I have my source DB underscore CDC that actually doesn't have any CDC enabled on that. What I want to do is to first enable CDC on the database. I use this sp underscore CDC underscore enable underscore DB, and I execute that. It's very simple. After executing that, I can check if my database, if CDC is enabled in any of my databases or not. So I just query my SIS databases for any of those that is CDC enabled. So as you can see, I have source DB underscore CDC with actually CDC enabled now. Now I want to enable CDC on the table. There's another SP underscore CDC underscore enable underscore table, which I define a schema, the table name, and some other configuration. I'll just enable this. It's quite important that you have your SQL Server agent up and running. The issue that you might get is that if you execute this and your agent is not up and running, sometimes you see an error message, sometimes you don't see an error message, but it's not always clear that this is because your SQL Server agent stopped. So you have to be quite careful about that. So my agent is started and running, so I run this to enable CDC on my table. It's take a little bit of time. The reason is that this will create a couple of SQL Server jobs. That's actually the reason why this should be the agent should be up and running, because because the up and running of that will create the job under SQL Server job section. So you see that I have CDC capture and CDC cleanup. Okay, so I'm not talking about those jobs, and I run this query as well to check if CDC is enabled on my tables. Yes, it is. I just query these tables for seeing if there is any of my tables CDC enabled. Okay, so that's everything you need to do in the database engine side. After setting these up in your database, you can go to your SSIS project. This is my SSIS project. Should be at least SSIS 2012, and you will find CDC Control Task under SSIS Toolbox. I'll just bring CDC Control Flow Task here. And in this CDC Control Flow Task, I just double click on this task. The configuration of this is quite simple. It needs an ADO.NET connection to the source database, I mean the database that we CDC enabled. That database is actually, here it is, my source DB underscore CDC, so I use that. And there is a CDC control operations. Before doing anything in your CDC project, it's quite important that you mark CDC as a start. This will actually, this is actually the first point of SSIS package to understand that your CDC is about to start, and everything from now should be captured as a change, right? So so that's why we use mark CDC start, and then the status of CDC should be stored in a variable, in a package variable. So we have to create a variable for that. I'll create a variable here. It's called just as a default CDC underscore state, and it's under the package. And then I just leave this LSN section, and my connection managers to the table that stores status. So when you work with CDC, there should be a table, I mean, when you work with CDC in SSIS, there should be a table that stores the latest state of the CDC. That table can be generated automatically if you press new button here. This will create a CDC underscore states table. You can rename it to whatever you want. This just has some columns like name of state and state of that, those kind of information, which you can run, and this will generate the CDC state table for that. Because I have generated that before, so I just use that CDC state. So that's all. Everything we need to do is this. So I'll press OK, and now what I have to do is just executing this package. It's just with that, but this will cause the CDC state to set as start for the first time for this table. So I'll execute the package. It has been executed. No data has been moved yet because this is just about the CDC state as a start. Now I can check my CDC state if I select data from that table that I have just created. So these are my table information, and this is name of my variable, state of that, and this usually shows the GMT date time. So that's just for the first instance. Then I disable that. I don't need this anymore. So that's for the very first time you want to do this. Then I'll start doing my package. So for my package, I want to actually first truncate my stage table. So my stage table is in Inc staging, and I write a truncate table stage sales underscore C. So that's just a simple truncate stage table. The next step is actually doing a CDC control check. So I truncated my stage table. Now I want to fetch information from the source based on actually the CDC state. So I want to actually set CDC start range. That means I'm getting range of the starting CDC. The configuration is simple as it was before. The only thing, everything is same. The only thing which will be different is that I have to set get processing range. There is a get processing range and mark processing range. I'll have to do get processing range before getting the change set, and if I get the change set successfully and transfer that to my destination table and database, then I mark process range. So any changes afterwards would be a new change set, right? So I get process range, same as before. I use this variable and I use this table. Everything is the same. Now I do a data flow task, which will be actually load data from source to stage. I'll do that data flow a bit later, and after doing that, I'll mark processing range. So CDC mark process range. So if that was successful, this means if the load task was successful, I'll mark process range by setting CDC control operation mark process range. And here is my variable and CDC state table. So that's everything I have to do in control flow. Let's go to the data flow section. So if I want to do in data flow, the first step for me is that instead of using OLEDB source or SQL data source or whatever, I should use CDC source. CDC source is a source that actually gives me a change set from the source table. So from this table that I have the connection manager to it, I want to get CDC enabled tables. This will check only CDC enabled tables and only will bring that for you. So that's my table that I have CDC enabled for that. Then I can say, okay, what part of the data I want? I can say I want all the data. I want all with old values or net or whatever you want. For incremental load, we are only actually considering net changes, which is or change set, insert, update, deletes. And the variable that contains CDC state is CDC state variable and a preview of the data. There is no data at the moment, but as you see, all columns are there, plus some metadata columns for CDC. Okay, so that's what you have to do in CDC Source. So CDC Source gives you a change set, but you have to identify what is the change. Is that an insert, an update, or a delete? So we have another component for that called CDC Splitter. CDC Splitter is quite easy to work. You just connect the output of CDC Source to CDC Splitter, and this doesn't have any configuration you have to make. You just get 3 outputs of that. One for insert, one for update, and one for delete. So what I'll do, because I'm using a status column in my stage table to identify is this update, insert, or delete. So I'm using a derived column here. I say inserted records should come here, deleted here, and updates here. You can do, updated. You can do all 3 in one, but let's make it more clear like that. So what I do, I connect the output of CDC Splitter to inserted. This asks which actually output you want. And as you see, there are 3 outputs of CDC Splitter. Here I want insert output, deleted output to this second component, and updated output to the last one. So as you see, CDC Splitter is quite easy to work. Now what I'll do in the inserted section, I say the status to be 0. 0 in my terminology for this flag. 0 means inserted. 1 means deleted. And 2 means updated. This is just my terminology. You can use whatever flag you want. So after all of these, I'll union all the results set, because I flagged that status. I'll union all of them into a single data set. Union all actually connects all the sources into single data set. As you can see, there will be an output set with combination of input of all of these columns. It works like union all in SQL Server. And then I load that into I load that into my OLEDB destination. So my OLEDB destination here will point to my staging and into my stage sales _C. So that's my stage sales. There are some couple of records there, but this will be truncated before our action. And I'll check the mapping. Everything is mapped correctly. So that's how I'll get the changes into my stage section. So that I'll call this package as extract, because it will get the data into the stage. I'll have to do another package for load. So this will get the data from a stage and load that into my actual fact table. So for this one, I'll just use a simple data flow task. This part is a bit easy, so I'll do that quite fast. So I get an OLEDB source here. My OLEDB source, I want to get data from my staging. Because I had a connection in my other package, I'll just convert that to a project connection to be able to use that here. So here it is, and I get data from my state sales. Before getting data from my state sales, I'll just change it to have a query for that. I'll have that query written. So I just want to use that query. So that's my query command here. So I'll get data from my source, as you can see, stage sales underscore C. Everything is the same, except I'll just generate a order date key based on the order date, which was a date time column. I changed that to a character string to have an order date key. Okay, so that's that. That will generate something like this for me. I'll get those information, and then I'll do a conditional split here. As I'm continuing, there have been some questions about some people have to leave early. Will there be a recording for session? Yes, there will be definitely a recording. I'll upload the recording in YouTube channel, and as well as sending the link to all of you. Okay, so in the conditional split, what I want to do is to separate inserts. So I say the record is inserted if the status is equal to 0. That's the status that I flagged there. And it is everything else is deleted and updated, right? So that's how conditional split works. You define a condition, and everything satisfied this condition will go into that output. Everything else will go to the default output. Okay, so if the record has been deleted or updated, what I'll do is I'll remove the existing record and then create a new one. You might want to do a different approach, but this is one of the approach that works quite good in terms of the speed as well. So what I'll do, I use an OLEDB command. OLEDB command is actually for running a typical command on a database. This can be any databases that you can interact with through OLEDB connection, like SQL Server database, like Oracle, like whatever. So I'll rename this to remove record. So I'll connect conditional split output only for deleted and updated records. And what I'll do is I'll remove the record in the data warehouse that I want to work with. So let's create a connection for that data warehouse. So I'll create an OLEDB connection, inc DW, which is my data warehouse connection. And what I'll do in my SQL command, I'll write delete from fact internet sales underscore C, where sales order number is equal to question mark. Question mark is parameter marker for OLEDB connection. When you work with other connections, you might have different parameter markers like @param, like actually your variable name, something like that. But this is how we work in OLEDB connections. And sales order detail ID is equal to question mark. Just to be sure that I'm writing this correctly, I'll just copy and paste from my notes. Okay, delete from fact internet sales underscore C, where sales order number is equal to question mark, and sales order detail ID is equal to question mark. So I have a couple of question marks here, which means I have a couple of parameters in this T-SQL. So I'll press OK on that, and in the column mapping section, I map these two columns into the parameters in my SQL statement. if you use stored procedure, these parameter names will have the actual name of parameters in a stored procedure, but I just did that for simplicity here. So I'll connect sales order number and sales order detail ID, and that's it. So I have my columns coming, and this will remove the record for me. After removing the record, then if that record has been a deleted record, I don't have to do anything more. But if the record has been updated record, I have to do another insert for that. So I'll use another conditional split here. Check updates. I call that check updates, and the output of that goes here. In check updates, I'll check if the status was 2. This means updated. Okay. So I'll get output of that, and I want to insert a record after that. I want to insert a record if the record has been inserted as well. So these two outputs should be combined into one set. I'll use a union all for that because I have to insert both. So output of that as an inserted output, and output of this one as updated. In either case, I'm going to create a new record. The reason is that for updated record, I have already removed the existing record, so I can create an updated one. So here is just the easy part of that, because I am loading into the fact table, so I have to do some dimensions lookup. So I do a customer dimension lookup here. In this lookup, I'll set the output redirect rows to not match outputs as well if no match entries, and in a connection I'll get everything from customer table. Not everything from customer table. Always best practice is that in lookup component, do not get the whole table if you can actually avoid getting whole tables. Try get only columns that you do need. The reason is that lookup component is a cache type of working components. You can set this to no cache or partial cache, but the benefit of this component, the speed and performance of this component, is when you do full cache. So if I do full cache, I have to minimize the size of my table, my data set, by reducing number of columns. So what I do is I'll write this query. I'll build the query here. I want my my dim customer table, but not everything from that. What I want is just customer key and customer alternate key. Customer alternate key for the lookup, and customer key to just return as the key for lookup. That's it. These are much smaller than fetching the whole table, and that will be something like this. And in the column section, I'll map customer ID from the staging into customer alternate key. If that was match, I'll fetch customer key. Okay. I'll do same for product dimension. So product, then lookup. I have only two actually dimensions here for simplicity. Usually you have much more. And I'll connect lookup match outputs. It's quite important that you consider lookup no match output as well, because those are kind of inferred dimension members, those that are not in your dimension but are coming as a source of your fact table. I'll have a different talk and speak about how to implement inferred dimension members. That's a whole separate thing, but just consider those kind of issues when you are implementing this as well. So I'll do the same for product dimension. I'll get them product, alternate key, and product key. And in the column section, I'll fetch product key. So that's it. And then I'll just load it into my destination, which is, if I could be able to find my OLEDB destination here, yeah. And I'll load all of these into my fact internet sales underscore C. Okay, and for the sales amount, I have line total, order quantity, I have order QTY. Okay, and I have to truncate my fact table before doing this thing. So that's it. There is another step to be done. So this is actually all you have to do in terms of extracting the data and loading that into the destination. So that's everything you have to do. The only thing here is that you have to do a first load as well. Usually that's part of the solution that you have to make. So I won't do that first load here because that will usually take quite a lot of time. So what I'll do is I'll just bring another package here. So that's another package that I'll do first load. In that first load, I'll get everything from that data flow, everything from the source table, and load that into a stage, and then from a stage into my close this, my destination, which is fact table. So I just want to run this first load to have a set of data set first and then do the rest. Because I'm doing the first load, it's quite important that I'll set the status of my CDC to mark initial start. So that's my start CDC. Oops, did I lift any connections? Everything seems to be fine. Okay. And after doing this, I'll mark that as initial end. So I'll do initial start and then I'll do an initial end. And this initial end, so initial means the first one offload that we will do usually. So I'll start this, and this will bring the whole data sets into my result set. So as a result, I see here that 60,000 something record is coming, and it's all new records. It has been all inserted into my destination. And if I go to my fact internet sales table, these are all 60,000 records in my fact internet sales table. Now, what's happened if I have any changes? So let's see what's happened in the change section. So I'll do a little bit of change here. I'll bring this source DB table here. I'll remove some columns, and I just update some of these quantities. And I want to create some records as well. I just copy one of these records and insert that back somewhere here with a different key. So that's it. I'll implemented some changes now here, which were some updates, deletes, and insert. This might usually take a little bit of time for these jobs to understand the change, but let's see if the change has been detected so far or not. So I'll do running my extract section first. This is not yet fully fetched by jobs. This usually take a bit of time. Just checking everything to be fine. Let's run that again. So here we go. So this actually, in this extract section, we found CDC and we understood that in this actually changed it. There are 4 records updated, 3 records deleted, and 1 record inserted. So we cached all of them and we inserted them all into our staging section. So if I look at my stage table, select star from stage sales, sorry, it was the stage sales underscore C, and it was in inc staging DBO. So here are those 8 records, and you can see that I have records with their status that shows is it inserted or deleted or updated. Now the next section in my ETL, which is the load part of the ETL, I just run that load part, and this will implement those changes into the destination. We had 1 record inserted, 7 records together updated and deleted. Only 4 of them has been updated. So this actually will be implemented all into the fact table, and here is the result set of my fact table. I have changes here now, and if I want to distinguish one of those changes, I can, for example, search for this, which was sales order detail ID, where sales order detail ID is equal to this. So here it's actually happened, and the change has been done. So that's took quite a lot of time. I wanted to show you some other methods as well for implementing other methods except than change data capture, because change data capture has some limitation. For example, if you have a source database that you cannot apply CDC on it, then you have to use another method like having date time columns or those kind of columns. But let's go through some of the questions for now. I'll just respond some of the questions and we will go through the rest. So the questions, email group link of recording at the end, yes. Recording, yes, almost everything about the recording. Resolution size, oh sorry, I have seen this a little bit late, but yeah, next time I'll keep that in my mind. The next question is about I have to work with CSV extracted from Oracle Financial. This is my source, and would CDC method still apply if I extract to load to SQL tables? If you are working with Oracle supports CDC, so it's much better to have CDC implemented on Oracle, and then same approach as I did in this SSIS. You have to use that. You have to only use CDC Authority connections for doing that, but that works perfectly. So try that. If you have any more questions about that, just let me know through my email address. Is this possible through recordings and recording? Yes, of course. Helpful question regarding SCD, capture, deletes, insert through SCD or just updates. If you use this kind of approach, you will have everything, deletes, insert, and updates. But regarding SCD, I'll have a different approach because SCD has some other consideration. SCD, when you are implementing SCD, you should consider incremental, inferred dimension members as well. That's a whole separate scenario that you need to be careful of. So that's something that I'll do in another webinar, probably in a month or 2. So keep in mind to be in that webinar to see what's happened. The other one, recording of webinar, yes. Your session, thanks, Manik. And from SQL Server to other applications, yes, definitely. This approach, good question, Sushant. This approach doesn't actually needs you to have a specific destination. Your destination can be anything. Your destination can be Oracle, DB2, MySQL, PostgreSQL, everything, literally. This method needs the source system to actually have ability to CDC enable. Otherwise, destination won't matter. Can we implement SCD type 2 using CDC? Yes, definitely you can, but there are some other methods for doing that as well, and there should be some consideration for import dimension member. What is requirement of source table format for doing CDC? At the moment, I don't think if there is any limitation. I'll check that out and then post that in my blog. And the other question is that one question is, I have huge data size, 90 million records. Can this be method tried? Yes, definitely. I worked with this method with tables with more than 300 million records, and this worked perfectly, especially for you. With that data size, you definitely need to do incremental load. That's why we do incremental load, to actually reduce our ETL time and reduce the load time. Is there any possible way this can be achieved in bits 2008 or less? There are, but you have to do some manual, by manual I mean by some custom development in your SSIS packages to capture the changes. You can do that definitely with Execute SQL Task, because with Execute SQL Task you can identify what is the state of CDC and fetch those states and set the states. All these things that we've done through these kind of components, you can do with executing a stored procedure. That's definitely possible, but you have to do a little bit custom scripting. By scripting, I mean T-SQL scripting. Has it need special permission on the data source? Yes. For CDC to be implemented, you have to be, I think, system administrator, I believe. I'm not exactly sure about that, but I will check that and let you know, Shahriar, about that. And the other one, I apologize, you responded already. Would we be able to get a copy of project itself? I'll put a copy of project as well in my blog. So that's answering the questions. Let's go back to presentation. We won't have any time for going through other demos, but I'll just explain you a little bit about datetime approach. So in datetime approach, if you can't use CDC, just a very quick one. If you can't use CDC, you have quite a lot of source systems that supports modified date, created date. Sometimes they have columns like is deleted. So these columns are quite helpful for you to do incremental load, because when you know when was the latest modified date time of a record, this is quite helpful because you can get everything from the latest ETL date time. So that's just a query where condition that will gives you the whatever you have as a change. So I won't go through the demo. And using unique identifier. Unique identifier is just the default method that you get everything from the source, look up into the destination. You should consider performance very carefully. You have to apply column store indexes. You have to consider dimensional modeling, data warehouse design principles to have small and good indexes on your fact tables, and data flow package structure should have the highest performance. So to use that method, that's the latest method that you might want to try, but there are some consideration you can apply. And finally, when you do incremental load, in most of the cases, you might think about rollback approach as well. Rollback is quite important because sometimes your ETL hasn't failed actually, but after a week, your business user, your report user comes and says, okay, this data isn't right because of that, because of this, the source system was not right, quite a lot of reasons. And we want to roll back. And they want to roll back to a specific time. They want to roll back to a week ago. They want to roll back to a custom date time, sometimes a month ago. This happens. I mean, in real world, this happens. In perfect world, which we are not living at, this doesn't happen. But in real world, this happens. So you should consider rollback type of scenarios as well. I'll suggest implementing rollbacks through some other metadata columns, like created date, modified date, and is deleted. But the discussion about that is taking a little bit of time. I'll definitely do another webinar about rollback, how to implement those rollback. So the reference to study more, let's go to that section. Just put some links to reference to study more for you. So if you want to study more, I'll have all the implementation steps that I've done. I have that in a blog post, Incremental Load with CDC. You can follow that blog post. The date time method, I have another blog post explaining that as well. If you have any questions about, if you want to learn SSIS, there are free SSIS 2012 tutorial videos on channel 9 that I've produced. You can read them through. I am doing a new set of SSIS 2016 tutorial videos that you can pre-order now. This is the link. I'll share slides with you through email as well. And there are some upcoming training that you might be interested as well. There will be ETL design patterns, considering everything in ETL challenges like incremental load, infer dimension member, slowly changing dimension, late arriving fact tables, early arriving fact tables, SSIS catalog, how to use logging, framework, all those kind of things. I'll have a couple of pre-cons in Melbourne and Sydney for February 2016. You can check the events in our website, and learning pragmatic SSIS 2016 tutorial videos that you can pre-order, and mastering ETL with SSIS containing all of these things will be available online. So stay tuned. You can always contact training@radacat.com. And here is my contact information if you have any questions. In this just couple of minutes, I'll prefer to respond to few questions. So what would be other recovery option for resuming incremental load apart from doing full load and continue with incremental load when CDC gets reset, like when ETL from replicated copy off? I'll have to read that a little bit more. I'm not exactly sure what the question is, but I'll read that a little bit more and I'll respond that into my blog post. I've seen a lot of settings regarding collation going existing package that running ETL since I can log in. How will CDC will work these collations differences between the environments? That's actually two separate things in this work. CDC will capture changes, doesn't matter any kind of changes, and collation is two different settings. So a change matter only in the source system. So when your source system is always the same, the change would won't actually interfere with the collations. Okay, some other questions. I'll prefer to keep these later on because everyone I think have to go at the moment. So I'll answer all of these questions. Thank you for attending. I'll answer all of these questions later on in a blog post. I'll send you a recording of this session as well. Thank you for attending, and if you have any questions, just send me an email or tweet me and I'll be in touch with all of you. Thank you.